The New York Times writes Japan to release treated water from ruined nuclear plant despite concerns. Masatsugu Shibata, a fisherman near the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, is concerned the plan to release the water will threaten his livelihood. Japan will begin releasing treated radioactive wastewater from the ruined Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant into the ocean this week, its government said on Tuesday, setting aside regional and domestic objections as it moves to eventually discharge over 1 million tons of the water into the sea. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida made the announcement after a meeting of his cabinet, saying the release would begin on Thursday if weather and ocean conditions allowed. The Washington Post writes in Trump cases, experts say defendants' rhetoric will be hard to police. Donald Trump's advisors see a win-win scenario in pretrial skirmishes over what he can say about indictments. Legal experts say that will be a tricky, perhaps impossible task, especially in a criminal prosecution in which politicians or their aides are the alleged perpetrators, witnesses and victims, and the defendant is running for president. On Monday, a state court judge in Atlanta issued strict limits on Trump's public statements as conditions of his release on election-related charges there. But policing and enforcing those kinds of rules will be a challenge for judges in many jurisdictions, including Chutkan, who is presiding over the case brought by special counsel Jack Smith in Washington. USA Today writes Biden met with grief over relief efforts in Maui after wildfires devastate the island. Ashley Correa has a lot of questions about the government's response to the wildfires that devastated her home island of Maui. Why wasn't it faster? Why wasn't the emergency cash assistance greater? What will the rebuilding look like? The 32-year-old realtor who has been part of private efforts to help friends, family and fellow Maui residents recover from the historic wildfires hoped President Joe Biden would get local feedback during his visit Monday to inspire him to do more to help. Maybe he needs that first-hand, in-person experience, Correa said shortly before Air Force One landed in Hawaii. Los Angeles Times writes Lizzo's brand was built on empowerment and acceptance. The singer faces a lawsuit from former backup dancers that threatens to undo her hard-won image as a beacon of empowerment and self-acceptance. Chicago Tribune writes Chicago Public Schools' new year begins with help from new mayor and many challenges. CPS faces big changes ahead as it begins its move to being governed by an elected school board, not one appointed by the mayor. New York Post writes angry Maui residents slam Biden as president brings lectern and tiny table for water to Hawaiian rubble. A group of several dozen residents of scorched western Maui heckled Biden's motorcade shortly after noon local time as it left tiny Kapalua Airport en route to the hardest-hit areas of historic Lahaina, which was destroyed on August 8. "Go home, Joe." The locals chanted as Biden passed by, moments before the president read a scripted speech touting the federal response, despite criticism from residents who say not enough help has been offered. The 80-year-old commander-in-chief has taken intense criticism, including from fellow Democrats, for appearing aloof following the deadliest U.S. wildfires in more than a century. Newsday writes school district to pay $14 million to settle suits by grads who allege teachers sexually abused them more than 40 years ago. The settlements rank as the largest of the nearly 24 settlements paid by Long Island school districts under the 2019 Child Victims Act. The Denver Post writes Keeler, Jonathan Taylor would look sweet in Broncos orange. The NFL's leading rusher in 2021 wants a trade out of Indy, with the Colts reportedly, as of Monday night, willing to oblige. Meanwhile, the Broncos have run the ball this month like an F-450 Super Duty and pass protected like a Peel P-50. So far, coach Sean Payton has picked up largely where Week 17 of last season left off, leading with a strong ground game, in which Russell Wilson's right arm is a side dish and not the main course. In keeping with that theme, there's a part of Broncos country that could picture Taylor, a power back with sprinter's speed, breaking tackles in orange and blue and keeping Patrick Mahomes bored on the sidelines. You could even tell yourself Taylor might be the new beast mode to old Russ, a formula that worked pretty darn well a decade earlier. San Francisco Chronicle writes SF private school alumnus accuses former drama teacher of sexual assault in lawsuit. An alumnus of an elite private school in San Francisco's Sunset District has accused a former drama teacher of sexual abuse, saying school administrators created a culture of secrecy that enabled predatory behavior for decades. The 41-year-old alumnus, who the Chronicle is not naming, sued St. Ignatius College Preparatory School, one of its former teachers and the Jesuits' West Province in San Francisco Superior Court last week, saying he was scarred by a pattern of assault and manipulation that persisted for years in the 1990s. His lawsuit alleges negligence and childhood sexual abuse, among other claims, and requests a court order for St. Ignatius to identify all priests and teachers accused of child molestation, along with an undetermined payment for damages. BBC News writes helicopter arrives at suspended cable car. We've been sent these pictures by Altaf Hussain, a teacher at another local school. He is currently at the scene, where he witnessed a soldier travel down a rope from a helicopter towards the cable car a little earlier.